All right, everyone, welcome to another episode of the Lions Guy podcast. And today I've got Tom Amenta on, and this podcast just kind of came out of nowhere because we're chopping it up about we just got hooked up by Mike Burke with the Always in Pursuit podcast, and he hooked us up, and then you and I hooked up, and we were talking. Yeah. We fell into this topic of veterans and what makes them have a competitive advantage and performance, and in the workplace and all that stuff. So we kind of like, hey, time out. Let's stop. Let's take this live, So we're here. Tom, tell everybody about yourself and where you come from.
Well, first of all, Dale, thanks for having me. And yeah, it was really funny how we're chopping it up. So we look at each other like, this might work. But, like you said, my name is Tom Amenta. I'm a former member of the 75th Ranger Regiment. I was at 2nd Ranger Battalion, which is where Mike and I met. He was in 2nd Platoon. I was in 1st. And then after that, I went to college, University of Illinois, got out from there and helped start the lifestyle apparel company, Ranger Up, sort of the first lifestyle apparel company really in that space, sort of helped pioneer that. Was kind of an interesting time in my life. Left there right at the start of 2016, did some safety and security stuff. Decided I didn't really like that for that version. Took a break, actually had the opportunity to sell my stake in Ranger Up, went all the way around the world with nothing but a backpack for about 5 months, came back, was at Google for a little bit. Now I am back in safety and security, but as the director of marketing this time, not trying to, do the business development and explain to schools what they need to do, which I promise you is a much, much nicer gig. And, in the middle of that, I also have been a serial entrepreneur, really on some levels my entire life. So I also have a content creation company that I'm co-partnered with called Valor. And we just released a book called The 20-Year War, which is just chronicling veterans and their experiences from the time they enlisted until they transitioned and what they're doing now. So sort of a holistic look. It's a portrait book, so you get a really detailed look at them. And those are the things that I do. That's sort of the short sketch on me, man.
Cool. Well, that was it, guys. Great podcast. We'll thank you. But that's all the stuff I want to hit with you today. But let's rewind back to your service. Like, why? How did you end up in the Army? Like, what got you there? How'd that end up happening?
I'm crusty and old as hell. So I enlisted on my 18th birthday in 1999. So for me, it was knowing that I was not mature enough to go to college and have any ability to actually do the coursework, right? I had just enough sense in myself. And my great uncle, who actually recently passed away, unfortunately, had been in Vietnam as a military intelligence officer, but he'd gotten attached to a whole bunch of special ops units, like the Green Berets before they were the Green Berets, and all the stuff that you heard of in lore. And so I asked him, Uncle Ralph, I want to do something worthy. I don't want to just go in. I want to do something awesome. I want to do something kind of like what you did. He goes, well, how do you, what are the things you want to do? I'm like, I want to shoot automatic weapons. I want to jump out of airplanes. I want to blow stuff up. And he's like, you want to be a Ranger? And so I enlisted, for the Ranger option, made it into 75th Ranger Regiment, which is the premier special operations raid force for the Army. And, that was it. So, the guy that introduced us, Mike Burke, and I, we were all in Germany actually when 9/11 hit, which was wild because, that was nothing. I was like, okay, I'm going to do this for 5 years. I'm going to go get some college money. And then, suddenly we're, it's like, oh yeah, now it's on. Right. And so, that's sort of the continuous global war on terror. We've been doing that for 20 years. And that's what got me in. And it was never to go fight or some of those things that you've seen over the time. It was just like, hey man, I need to grow up, and I'm the oldest of 4, and my parents don't have enough money for 4 kids to go to college. So, let me be the good eldest son and, sort of do my thing. And, that's where it started.
Right. And your parents weren't vets? Just your great uncle? Oh, right.
Both of my grandfathers and my great uncle served. Then the entire generation after them did not. And then I'm the only person on either side of the family that isn't served, with the exception of a second. I'm Italian, as you can tell from Amenta. So if you want to go out to my cousins, you get far into the second, third cousin, it's up in the background. But so I'm always careful. But no, as far as my immediate family or that one ring out, I'm the only one.
So how long did you end up serving?
So I was active duty for 5 years. And then I stayed in the National Guard because I got out in '08. And then again, my great uncle was like, listen, Tommy, he's one of the few people that can still call me that. He's like, if you get out, they're going to hit you with the inactive ready reserve. Go to the Guard. And he's like, your background's great. You could be a great instructor. So I did that for the state of Indiana, teaching infantry and combat tactics. And then I actually re-enlisted in the Guard. I was like, all right, I can do this. And then when I started Ranger up, I moved to North Carolina, moved to the North Carolina Guard, taught the same stuff, but instead of, guys getting ready to go overseas, and some of those students in Indiana, that was a wild time, Dale. Like, they were on a plane, and actually not just on the plane, but in Kuwait, ready to cross over 36 hours after leaving my course. You want to talk about pressure and really feel like you better get it right. That on some levels was way more stressful for me than even things I did in the Ranger Regiment, because it wasn't about me anymore. It was like, could they pick up what we were teaching them? Could they immediately apply it? In North Carolina, I did that more before the OCS. So, officer candidates, it was a lot calmer. That's actually where I met Dan Blakely, who I'm now working with at United Valor. And so I did that for 9 years. So 14 years total between active and Guard.
And are you out now?
Yeah, totally. We're done with that life, man. Great times. Loved them. We good.
And I guess it's funny how similar we have in story in that regard. And I guess, Mike, what did you expect, right? So you're talking to your great uncle about what you want to do. What did you expect going in? What did you expect it to be like?
Oh, man, I don't want to be a cliche, but I guess it's just how, I kind of expected to be like the movies, not quite Rambo. Like, everyone knows you're not shooting from the hip. Like, I'd figured that out, but sort of like that Full Metal Jacket, that just sort of insane, Heartbreak Ridge. I watched all those movies when I was a kid. And then, I also really had this thing that it was like, okay, so, I'm going to be told what to do, when to do, how to do it. And, basic training, that's pretty much it. You're going to do DNC, drill and ceremony forever. And then, you're going to do things by the numbers. And, but once I started getting to the what we call the Ranger Indoctrination Program, now it's called the Ranger Assessment and Selection Phase. It was really way more about how you thought. They were going to make you do a whole bunch of push-ups and prove that you had the raw materials and the metal to stick through it. But could you figure out land nav problems, and could you do it at night? Could you really think your way through? And when you got lost, could you problem solve? The questions that they were asking were really designed, and especially because I saw this working staff later after I got hurt, it was all designed to test your mental acuity. And you got to the unit, and I'm a brand new private. I mean, I haven't even been there a week, and we're on dry erase boards with our specialists, and they're asking us, they've drawn up an entire city, a couple city blocks. How would you take it down? I've entered and cleared a room 3 times, right? But they're already think your way through the battlefield. We're going to get you how to shoot. You're going to execute battle drills all the time, but it was constantly that. And I never thought for, my wildest imagination, that was how it was going to be. But almost instantaneously, it was like, if you can't problem solve your way through this and find the simple solution to keep moving and keep problem solving, you are not going to make it in this unit.
Yeah. I mean, well, there's definitely that never quit. It just gets there's not an option. And we'll go real and raw. You quit, you die. There is no quit. There is a solution here, some way, somehow that needs to be found, which I think talking some of the, veteran advantage stuff, I think that perseverance and grit, just gets ground into you. It becomes hey, this is the way we live. We've got to get this done. Mission accomplishment. It was something that I always remember, and I still teach today. There's a reason that, in the Marine Corps, we were taught, the primary and secondary leadership objectives are mission accomplishment, then troop welfare, right? Because, there is no welfare to troops if you can't accomplish the mission, right?
The mission, the men and me. That's, if you're going to use another one that, I heard that from a former Delta commander, it's always the mission first, then it's the people you're working with. And then finally, it's you. And, with a couple of long scale projects, making sure you're not burning yourself out so you can be an effective leader. I think that's some of the nuance, but at its core, you've got to do the job. I take that with me, and I've taken that with me everywhere. As an entrepreneur, when I've hired people or when I work with people and it's getting a little testy, I'm like, listen, We live in these organizations and we are here to add value and solve problems. That is why we have a paycheck. That is why we have been given these roles and this responsibility. And I think the military does it's just so fundamental. It's so core to mission accomplishment that if you can't help complete the mission, they're not using you. I mean,
Right.
no, and especially in a unit like the Ranger Regiment, where they can look at you and go, "Hey, thanks for coming out, but you're gonna have to go down the road and go somewhere else because you cannot add enough value and solve enough problems inside of this organization. So you need to go find another home."
Sure.
Which some military units don't have, but special operations did, and and it was especially so. The guy that introduced us, Mike, and I were in an absolutely legendary company for Bravo Company, 2nd Ranger Battalion from about 2000 to 2003. The number of guys that went over to the unit, across the fence, to Delta, all three of the platoon sergeants for the line platoons ended up being command sergeant majors of a Ranger Battalion, and one of them ended up going to the next level to be the command sergeant major of the Ranger Regiment. Our company commander ended up getting battalion command for 1st Ranger Battalion. I mean, our first sergeant went to Grenada and didn't retire he didn't retire until like 2013. Just Duke Durkin's a literal living legend across decades. I mean, you can't throw a stick. Like it's funny. Like I'm not even in just purely the veteran content creation space. I am not even the most accomplished member from that company. That's either Jericho Denman, whose War Office Productions does a whole bunch of like stuff with movies and, The Outpost with Scott Eastwood. He was the military technical advisor for that. Or John Lovell, who's Warrior Poet Society, right? Like these guys are, and I'm one of the people who pioneered the category, for Christ's sake, and I'm probably the bronze medalist in this, like, just insane group of guys, right? And I was actually having this conversation at my day job when we were talking about leadership, and because ultimately a leader's got to be able to set an example, and it's like at 18, 19, 20, I didn't really understand it, but I look back now at 40 and I go, the table stakes of knowing what right looked like for so long and so instantaneously with that group of people was just, unbelievably. It's a life lesson you will never, ever be able to learn unless you just happen to be in the right place at the right time. Right.
Right.
Truly and I didn't even mention Leroy Petrie was a private with me and we're still very good friends, but he was awarded the Medal of Honor. Like this was the group of guys that we were a part of, just leadership oozing out of everybody's pores. It was incredible.
Yeah. That's awesome. I mean, and that's like, that kind of cliche, like rising tides lift all boats, man. Like to be surrounded by that type of, drive, excellence, like, passion, it's just awesome. You just can't help but, if nothing else, you're going to draft with them. Like they're going to suck you up,
Oh, I am the first person to tell you I was at best a mediocre Ranger in the company of those guys. Like I would love to tell you I was Star Spangled Awesome. Nah, I wasn't. I was middle of the pack, but at the same time, I'll be in the middle of that pack any day of the week because of where, just you learn what right looks like. You learn so many lessons in an organization like that. And, it's one of the things I carried with me. And to this day, I hate feeling like I'm the smartest guy in the room because I always want to be learning something. And if I start thinking like that, I have to remind myself to be more humble and start paying attention and seeing the things in that room that I can learn so I can assess and things like that. Because even if I've got the IQ or the EQ, let's say, it doesn't mean that I'm the person that can handle problem X or problem Y. It just means that, I might be the architect for something.
Sure. Yeah, definitely. So with that all said, like, what did you learn, like now looking back on your military career? Like, cause it was kind of like, I feel it's just was most things, but sometimes you're looking back and go, this is what you weren't learning it then, but what about like you look back on and go, these are some of the things that really I learned while I was in.
One of the things, I'm not an inherently patient person, right? That's just the hardest lessons for me to learn is patience. And then there was a time in my life that empathy was not the easiest thing for me. But when I look back and I see the patience and the empathy that my leadership gave me as this very uncomfortable, very awkward, kid that grew up in the middle class, that really didn't have sort of like that warrior spirit necessarily put into them the way that some people that really have to fight and scrape just to get to their enlistment contract, right? Like, I definitely have a streak of sort of Charlie Sheen's character in Platoon where there's like, oh, I volunteered. And they're all looking at him like, idiot. You know what I'm saying? Like, so looking back and seeing that and seeing, how they recognize something and realize they were going to have to develop a little more out of me. They were going to have to work with me a little more, that it would have been very easy on some levels for them to just cut sling load and be like, he's too much work. But I am where I'm at because they chose to invest in me. And, I think that the other thing I look at that and I remember is that I worked hard. That was the one thing that even when my leadership didn't feel like I was picking it up quickly enough, or they wanted to really get at it, like, the work ethic was always there. That was never in question. And I think that's ultimately what got the investment. So to me, it's like, are they working hard and are they working with intent? Because that was the other thing. If I see that in somebody, and I think it was what really inspired me to want to be an instructor in the National Guard and why I re-enlisted for it, is that if I saw those things in people, I can get you where you need to go in those places I'm at in my life. My tactical and technical, from a bootstrap entrepreneurship phase 1 to, teaching combat techniques to, the marketing principles that I use every day. I can get that person from the baseline and I can get them up there, but that's what they need. And I think that veterans per capita have that ability and have that inside them because of, one, that drive to mission accomplishment, but two, that pressure of not wanting to let your buddies down. And so if I see that veteran, civilian, otherwise, I know I can work with that person. And I know that person has a chance to be truly great because that's the raw material you need. It's not necessarily can they run, Facebook ad set to my target right away? I can teach you how to do that. Can they, conduct battle drill 1 alpha? Well, I can teach you how to do that. But what I can't teach you how to do is bite down on your mouth guard and say, I am not going to quit, and work really hard with intention. And that's the raw material, and that's the building blocks of greatness, in my opinion. It really is.
Yeah, I was reading about that in that book, Grit. I think it's Amy Duckworth.
Angela Duckworth, Grit?
Yeah, Angela Duckworth. Yeah, I was reading this. I've been reading it recently, but great book, man. And just talking about, I was hitting this morning, the chapter, and you kind of reminded me of it, is just the fixed mindset versus the growth mindset, right? Mm-hmm. And it was kind of reminding me even in this, it's like, and I was wondering, is it not only do you see the hard work and that perseverance and the hard workingness, but what she was saying is they also have to be open to growth. They got to go, I'm going to get this, as opposed to, I can't do this.
I mean, it's one of those things where, one of the thing about the Ranger Regiment, like I said earlier, is it's the premier raid force. Raiders are not behind walls. Okay. They're not in castles. They are not on the defensive. Raiders are the aggressors. They are going out. They are hunting. We used to say we're going hunting in the middle of the night when we turn our night vision on. Right. And I think that mindset, because that's also just been so beaten into me. Like I've had to learn professionally when to not be as aggressive, right? When to not take the chance. Where a lot of people, like when sort of someone needs to, in my life that I trust, sort of pulls the reins on me, like I am not the horse that needs to be spurred. You know what I mean? Yeah. And I think that is, I think that that's one of those things, but I think that is when you want to talk about that growth mindset, wherever you find it and however you see it, you have got, especially if you want to be an entrepreneur, man, you sit still and you are going to die because someone is going to go there. When I advise, especially veterans that want to be entrepreneurs and things like that, and they're like, hey, someone's offering to invest in, my first question is, do you need it? Not want it. Show me your margins. Show me your growth trajectory. Show me, like, do you need it? Because if the answer is, I really genuinely need the capital infusion in order to continue the business, that is one conversation. But if when you start looking at it, this is just something to make someone more comfortable, I always say, don't take it. You don't want to be comfortable. You don't. You get to, certainly not in the beginning, certainly on the face. You want to be as lean and you want to be as hungry and you want to be as aggressive as you possibly can, in my opinion, because, you know, when you get to a more mature business, when you have a track record, you know, suddenly things open up. Instead of, you know, potentially going to VC, maybe you go to the bank for the loan, like, because you want to expand. But that initial sort of, zero to break even profitability, or zero to sort of, break even plus, reinvestment, that phase, dude, hungry, lean, and always on the razor's edge is what I tell people. And that's definitely something I learned in the military, is you've always got to be out there. You've always got to be pushing harder and harder and harder, because no one's going to do it for you. No one cares. And when you're comfortable, you're complacent.
Yeah.
When you're comfortable and you're complacent, that's when you start making the avoidable mistake. You're going to make mistakes. I mean, forget business, forget leadership. I'm going to walk down the street over the next week and trip over my shoelaces because I'm a moron, right? Like, and then I'm going to look embarrassed and whatever. Like, it's a mistake, right? I should have tied my shoe. Things like that are going to happen. They're unavoidable. But the mistakes you can't avoid: complacency, lackadaisicalness, being not preparing to the level that that you should. One of the things I think that, a veteran with the right mindset, and I know we'll talk about that later, is they don't do that nearly as much because they know what the cost of being unprepared on the battlefield is, right? Yeah. And that is cataclysmic. That is not, we didn't get the sale. That is not, we're a week late on the deliverable. That's not, and that is, someone might die. And if someone dies because you weren't prepared, that's on you. Again, just like there's mistakes in everyday life, naturally, sometimes bad things happen on the battlefield. I know you and I can both relate to that on some levels. But if you were the guy that was unprepared on mission and something bad happened, that's on you. And that is not a burden that anyone ever wants to live with. Like, that is a healthy fear of failure. And, you learn that. And I try and instill that in in anybody, civilian, military, otherwise, like, hey, are you prepared? Because if you're not and you fail, that's the one that's going to stick with you. Not that you got in the batter's box and try and hit the bomb, that you did not give your best effort and you know it. So get in there and hack for a long ball. Don't try and bunt your way on.
Yeah. It's getting prepared is something that I train on. I've been putting together a course on self-leadership, and it's the 6th discipline I put in there, which was get prepared, because I just know there's a distinct difference. It just, let alone the catastrophics that could happen of not being prepared, but the lack of efficiency, right? The stress, the disorganization, the poor decision. It's like, so I made it a whole part of it, because like, I know when I walk into something unprepared, versus even if it's 5-10 minutes to kind of decompress where my head was and take 5 minutes and set my intentions of what I'm about to walk into, just 5 minutes of getting my head right, let alone, like, personally for me, like, and I've taken this to extreme. I prepare for my next day before I end my day every day. I prepare for my next week before I end my week every week. And same thing with every month, because I have just seen, just like, getting that think work done ahead of time. Yeah. Just, dude, I'm flying, dude. It's just, getting prepared is, it's just key. It's just a key essential.
I think it's funny. And one of the things I find so fascinating about sort of that veteran, or that, because you hear so many cliches that come from the military community, the warrior mindset, right? I mean, even grit, and especially being in a special operations unit, like, one of the things I find so absurd now is that there's a Navy SEAL that's trying to teach SEAL box breathing. Yogis have been box breathing for 5,000 years.
Yeah, where do you think they got it from? Yeah.
Off, right? But and I think that it comes back so much in what you're saying, is that it's the preparation and it's the stakes, right? Everyone understands that in the military, there is these life and death stakes. And I think that you're seeing so much of this sort of militarization of business buzzwords on some levels, because we've been doing this for 20 years. And even if I think that at large, the civilian, especially the business community, really doesn't understand veterans. And that's one of the things that at United Valor, we're very committed to trying to change. But it keeps seeping in because you have those stakes. one of the other things that I do try and do, and this is sort of the opposite side of that coin, is remind people that in your business, those aren't the stakes. You are not going to die. As bad as it was at Ranger Up at times in the startup, and there was, one of Nick's favorite stories to tell about our organization, and it was funny because I was with the United Valor guys through the Warrior Rising nonprofit, and we were doing the pitch competition, and the winner was going to get $20,000. We're in the finals, right? The guys make it to the finals, and at that point, I'm with them too. And my former business partner is the MC of it, and he's like, "Let me tell you a story about perseverance and dedication." And we had grown about 300%, just rocket ship growth. And we needed new screen printers. Well, one guy broke off from one of the main production houses that we had and said, "Hey, I'm setting up my own shingle." Worked really well with him at that firm. He's like, "Would you guys be willing to consider giving us some business?" And like, we needed printers. We're like, "Well, yeah, man." So we gave him some business, and it's the holiday season, and he's like, "Yeah, I'm trying. Late. We have 3 days. No, 2 days. I'm sorry, until we are not going to be able to ship and fulfill orders." And he's like, "I can't do it." Oof. What do you mean you can't do it? He's like, I don't have the bandwidth. I can't do it. I'm like, here's the, it's like, I can't ship them to you on time. I'm like, okay, I'll see you in 18 hours. He's like, what? I'm like, I will see you in 18 hours. Literally walked into Nick's office. I'm like, I'm renting a U-Haul. I'm driving from North Carolina to the Midwest. I'm going to go get our shirts. He's like, you serious? I'm like, you got another way that we're going to get this done? Like, yeah. You got another way? He's like, no. I'm like, all right, cool. See ya. Yeah. Literally called U-Haul, grabbed a box truck, get up there. They're still not done. I start running when you screen print, so they do the squeegee and then you put it through a dryer. Well, I don't know how to do the squeegee. I don't know how to do the setups, but any yokel can run the freaking dryer, right? Literally turn it to 5 out of 10, and set it and let it cure, right? So these guys are printing. I am running things through the dryer, brought someone else up with me to do the QC and make sure the shirts look good, pack it all up, drive back, and just barely make it just in time for everyone else to ship everything else out. That is one of those things where people are like, I can't believe you did that. Like business people, like, you're nuts. Like you should have found it, whatever. That's part of the business commitment and part of where I think the veteran thing is. But whenever I tell the story about that, I'm like, that is about the worst it has ever been for me in business. Like where I've had to do the Herculean thing, right? Well, here's what happened. When I got home, still went to my bed and fell asleep. Anytime that I wanted to eat, I ate. Anytime I wanted to drink something, I could drink it. No one was shooting at me. No one was going to die if I failed, right? Now, and that's the line. And that's where I think the sort of militarization and it gets overcorrected, or you get so many people, like us that try and get into the coaching or the leadership thing, where sometimes I got to remind even my peers, it's like, yo, dude, don't forget that there is a difference in the stakes, because the more you heighten something, the more you ramp up the world of warrior mindset, your average person, even your average entrepreneur, does not have the reps of literally being shot at or literally being around these super high stressful things, and doesn't frankly have, if you look at psychology, the operant conditioning to get things from your forebrain to your midbrain where it just goes. That's what a battle drill is at the end of the day. Yeah. I say this instructors, making you not think about this series of simple tasks, right? And there's plenty of business battle drills out there where you just do it. You just know input X requires output Y. And you go, you cut the neural pathways and you drive. And that's one of those things that's operant conditioning. I know conditioning is a dirty word. It's what it is. We do that to ourselves. And we do that to people every single day. And it's don't confuse these things. There is a time where it's okay, there is a time where call timeout. Sometimes you can't do that on the battlefield, right? You really can't. But sometimes but you've also been trained to such a specific, very, very specific razor's edge of a very, very specific group of 5 or 6 tasks that you draw from that menu and you go, right? If you have someone who has that 5 or 6 task menu as a business owner, because they know their business that well, then yeah, man, turn the heat up.
Yeah.
But the battlefield pause is just as possible, is just as positive. And that's where I think the militarization gets a little too crazy, where it's like, you know what? I could have refunded money. I could have tried to find goodwill the other way instead of going the Herculean way. But like, that's the crazy story in business. And it's nowhere near, I still had a million options. We just chose the one that was going to drive the most happiness for our customer because we felt committed to that. And I think that that's a level that sort of military warrior veteran ethos, but there's still other options. Right. And, and recognizing as a vet, or recognizing as military, when to turn the heat up and when to turn it down, and realize I am not in combat. I am not in battle. I have an extra breath. I was prepared, right? Again, it goes back to that. I was prepared. I had a plan. It just didn't go the way I wanted it to. So what's next? And you don't always need to make that decision in 5 seconds. And I think that that's where vets, frankly, get themselves in trouble. Or, people that are really military adjacent, they get themselves in trouble because they think, oh, I got to go to the next. I got to go to the next. Sometimes the best thing you can do is go for a walk around the block and think.
100%. Like, that's something I've definitely added to my toolbox in the last 10 years for sure, because I think you're hitting on something that I had to learn, which was I'm not a hard charging sergeant dealing with Marines who lived 13 weeks of Marine Corps boot camp anymore. I'm dealing with folks that have a completely different mindset. And I had to learn to cool out because there also comes a matter of inefficiency because you're just beating folks down that they just aren't capable of that type of pace, that type of pressure, that type of mindset, like that, the run through walls mindset. We're going to get this stuff done. So I appreciate that. And I'm glad you brought that up, because I'll say, I was talking to someone yesterday about this as an example. Like, I hit a point where I would set meetings for 50 minutes, not hours, so that I could have 10 minutes in between to decompress from that meeting and get prepared to go into the next meeting, not meeting to meeting. Like, hey, I'm gonna slow down, take a pause, like you said, catch my breath, decompress from that, get those to-dos, get that meeting accounted for. Okay, what do I want to get out of this one? Do I got my, and just taking that pause to just, it kind of all comes together here, right? Like taking that pause to get prepared, check the mindset, because I guess the reason we were talking about it was because, especially when you get out in corporate, and if you're in one of these places where it is meeting, meeting after meeting and stuff like that, the problem is if you don't decompress in between those meetings and you just run hard all day, you go home and 1, you're exhausted, 2, you're PO'd, you're not present, and you're just, it's like you just keep adding to your ruck after every meeting, and then you carry all that weight home with you, and now the wife and kids just don't have you, because you're just carrying all that load. So taking that pause as often as you can, just to figure that out, put it away, and keep moving.
Well, one of the things that I also, because you were talking about speed and movement and allocation and the hard charging thing. So I was advising a friend of mine who's an officer, and he's still in the reserves, and he was just expressing a tremendous amount of frustration for his day job, with his team. And he's like, they're just not. And I'm like, let me ask you a question. I'm like, if you're telling me that they can't run at your level, right? And they're trying. I'm like, if you dial it back, I go, if they're at your 6, right, and you're at your 10, and you dial it back to your 7, right? Don't come all the way to, like, people have still got to grow. People have still got to come your way. Like, let's table stakes that. But you come to your 7 and you expect them to come from their 6 to your 7. I go, how much more effective are you going to be? And at first, like, well, yeah, but I'm like, no. You're the leader. This is your project. This is your organization. You're telling me that this isn't laziness. This isn't even a lack of application. This is a lack of understanding of how to do something. Is that, And I think that is definitely not a veteran exclusive thing. I think that for me as a vet, I think we have a harder time with that because we're so used to the tribe being so committed, right? And being so, and having that to recognize that it's not that they're bad people. It's not that they're lazy. It's not even that they're inefficient sometimes, although, that's graduate level work. But at the end of the day, I know I run hard, right? I'm thankful. I work for a guy who's just another serial entrepreneur right now. And him and I work really, really well together because we're ready to sprint every single day we walk into the office. Like, we're ready to sprint. But there is so much, like, the rest of the org is just not those people. And, there's times that both of us will be like, hey man, like, it's got to be an 8 today. Can't be a 10. It's got to be a 7 today.
Yeah.
It can't be a 9. And I think that vets have a unique challenge in having to learn that lesson. But I think that that's a universal one, because you take away sort of those ethoses, and you just talk to someone who's super technically competent, who's super, super intelligent. Like, I've got one guy that I'm friends with, who knows more about computer science than maybe anyone I've ever met. Like, he starts talking, and I mean, I worked at Google Cloud. I mean, I'm not a total moron, and I just glaze over. I'm just like, what? Right? Tell him all the time. I'm like, man, if you can't speak 5-year-old with it, who's going to care? I mean, you and your coding buddies. I mean, don't get me wrong, you're doing great stuff, man. I love it, but I don't get it, and I'm not a novice, right? I don't understand. Like, you've got to be able to speak that language. You've got to be able to realize and assess, person's here, I'm here, and we're going to get here. And I think that is one of those leadership lessons that is just in general really hard, right? Like, to turn those knobs. And I think that's the art of leadership on some levels, right? Is having the recognition, having the humility to do it. And then on the back end, having the accountability and the sort of the touch to say, hey, look, we made a real assessment, recognize where this organization was, and we will not lower our standards. You have to perform. But at the same time, I also recognize that my timeline needs to be adjusted, and I now need to communicate, farther down the line to whatever, levels that are required and are needed. So it's definitely one of those places where I think that, vets see themselves as much a service as they do a disservice. But I also think that you can learn lessons and read about, military leadership and stuff all day long, but I still think that's the hardest thing in leadership, is to recognize those things. And because that's where the self-leadership turns into organizational leadership, right? Mm-hmm. And that's always the sticky wicket, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And it's knowing, again, a couple of things on that. And we learned this in service, right? It's just like knowing your troops in business, know your people, like know what they're capable of, so that you can, when you're setting your goals, they've got to both be attainable and realistic, right? Just like you said, if you're running at 10, but your team is not capable of a 10, like, say, you just drop it down. So, like, that is leadership. That is your job. It's not to just have an expectation and a judgment. It's to get them to meet an attainable expectation,
right?
And help them get there. So I think that's great. I think the other thing you touched on too, that I didn't even want to skip over, even to your catastrophe in the holiday season, it was also the difference of that mindset, expecting that growth mindset. And it was the difference, like what I heard you say, like, I can't. And your mindset was, how are we going to do this? Right. Like, it's not, I can't do this. It's like, how am I going to do this is a big, just a big execution differentiator, right? Just as much as, you're right. If you say you can't do this, you can't do this. Right. But if you take that mental capacity and focus it on, how am I going to get this done, and go execute on that, it's going to happen. You're going to figure out a way.
That those changes right there are not only so powerful, in my opinion, but they do so much for your organization. I really hate cliches, like, they bother me, but it's like the one, like, take can't out of your, take never out, man, like, if forget all that. But if you just walk in, and I always say this, like, so I'm a big, I grew up in Chicago. I'm a big Chicago Cubs fan, and I love Theo Epstein, and I love the way he does things. But he always says, like, listen, my goal every single day is to always find a way to make something 1% better. And look at the scale of that. And it's like, if all you do, if this is the only thing you take from this podcast, is you say, how can I make something 1% better, and do that every single day? That is the growth mindset that will, before you know it, you're going to be seeing things in a totally different way in the world. And, that was never explicitly expressed to me in the military, but what was you will not fail the mission. You will complete the mission. And in order to complete the mission, you've got to get creative. You've got to think outside the box. You've got to apply that. How do I make this a little better each time we do it, each time we rehearse it, each time we practice it? And I know this is how I grew up, just even as a kid. I know that this is sort of my life goes. That is the one, because we're talking about this, that for me personally is probably my biggest challenge in leadership right now. My biggest frustration is because I don't understand people who don't do that. I understand fear, right? I understand trepidation. I understand concern, or that someone does not have my insane risk tolerance. Like I scuba dive and I jump out of airplanes for fun. I do Brazilian jiu-jitsu and Muay Thai for fun. Okay. Like, and I know you're a jits guy too. It's like, I get that my risk tolerance is way out there. And I understand that people are not going to have that. And I'm generally cool with that. But man, when someone's that I can't, or even that I don't see why we should,
Oh yeah.
it's just like the silent scream, man. It's like, and that's where I've got to really remember to keep it clean, to keep it, to keep it 100, as the kids say, because I'm ready to. That's where the veteran mindset works against you, because I'm ready to revert back to team leader Sergeant Amenta, and he was articulate and he was eloquent in an entirely different gutter sort of way.
Yeah, that's it. Like keeping that monster chained up is a struggle. I've done it, and look, and it goes back to, like, as a leader, you got to know your the power of your influence. So when you let that monster out, you got to know, like, some people can't survive that, and they might not remember what you said, but they'll remember how you made them feel. And that's the beginning of the end. You can lose some good people by letting that dog off the chain.
I did. At Ranger Up, I absolutely did, man. And honestly, what I thought was really interesting is that the next job, the safety security job that I had, following that, they lost me on some levels, because the guy that was my supervisor at the time would call me at 4:45 every Friday to check in for the end of the week. Just tell me you don't trust me, bro. Like, I mean, you want to talk about bad leadership? Like, just tell me you don't trust me. Just tell me that you're going to micromanage me. Just tell me all of that, right? Because we all know what you're doing, and you're not checking in at 4. You want to be able to say to your boss that you check the box, and and I asked him about it one day. He's like, "Well, hard days work for a hard day's pay." Hey, the 1950s production line call. They want their working leadership theory back, right? I mean, you know what? Yes, if you're going to be working on an assembly line, time is absolutely a critical factor to your throughput. I got a Lean Six Sigma black belt, man. Like, let's go have that conversation. But when you're working in sales and you're working primarily with school districts with PS, they're done by 4, and the maintenance people are certainly not there unless there's an event past 4:15 on a Friday. You want me to do what? I already sent you my reports. You told me you had, like, what do you want? And I think that's the... I feel like we've talked a lot about really good leadership, and I hate harping on negative, because I don't think that's helpful. But if you can't, like you said, get to a growth mindset rather than and push forward, rather than that sort of castle of, this is the box I need to check. Like, if you don't trust me to do my job, fire me. And I've said that to people that I work with. It's like, listen, if you're telling me right now that you don't trust this person, they should not be in your organization.
Yeah.
And that's a hard conversation to have, and it's not always easy. And maybe that person, in a lot of other ways, is a super high performer. I get it. I get the risk. But if you're telling me you don't trust them, this is coming one way or the other. This is not going to be what you want. You have got trust is critical. And that's, just because we keep tying this back to the military, I had my roommate at the beginning when I was in the Rangers. I did not like him, and he did not like me. He literally at one point stole my car to go hang out with his friends. And I mean, this is like, you're laughing because it's like the typical barrack stuff. Like, this is not an uncommon story for people who have not been in the military. Like,
you had me at I didn't like my roommate. I'm like, I don't think any of us ever like our roommates when we walk in that, the 10 by 10 concrete room.
Right. But I'll tell you what, it was pretty apparent, but I never for a moment doubted him. I never did not trust him when his literal gun barrel is right here, right behind me as the foreman, or on the whatever, as we're going through a door. Like, I knew that he was going to do everything. I trusted him implicitly. I literally trusted him with my life. But, that didn't stop us from fighting, literally, and, that's fine. I just think that that's one of those things where, you have to be able to separate certain things. But if you don't trust people, one, if you don't trust everybody in your organization, that's on you. You're failing something. But two, if you just look at this one person and every single time, like, I don't trust him, like something in your makeup, something in your determination is telling you something, and you need to listen to it. And you either need to have a very hard conversation to reestablish that trust, or you have to have a really hard conversation to separate from that, because that will crater an organization, that will harm things. Absolutely.
Yeah. And I've seen really bad leadership of that. I've seen guys like they don't trust anyone. So they go Uber Big Brother, and they've got a camera every single in every single place that they could have it. And they just monitor it like a hawk. And it's hey, you were 5 minutes late on Tuesday. Like, and the culture there of the team is just like, why am I here? Like you were saying, like, if you don't trust me, what am I doing here? And when you take those shackles off the team and go, hey, I trust you're going to do a good job. Let me know what you get done or whatever. And just, they have that freedom, and again, at least if you're taking that pressure off them, like, there's this negative distress that as a leader you can put on folks. And that too, like this, maybe the Big Brother thing or the micromanagement stuff and all that stuff, like this added pressure is making them inefficient. Like they're not serving you well. And the worst thing about our psychology and especially guys with that ego, that they don't trust anyone and no one could do it as good as me. And I get, if I'm not cracking a whip, they're not going to get it done and all that stuff. Like what I've seen is that mindset. Now they go try to affirm their thinking. Now they want to prove themselves right. Like, yep, I told you so. I got you. I knew I couldn't trust you. And there, you know what I mean? It's just like, I've been in a place like that, and it was just like, man, dude, like, it's just, I don't get it. It's just, yeah, I'm not there.
And, it's one of those things that at the end of the day, the people that stay, they stay for the paycheck. It's totally transactional at that point. And, they've done so many studies at this point where when you meet sort of like your viable, hierarchy of needs type stuff, why do people stay? What drives them? What motivates them? And it's very, very rarely the additional cash, right? Like, sure. I am an entrepreneur. I am here to make some money. I am here to have a better life, and cash coming in certainly helps with that. But, once everything's taken care of, it's more of where you're going to choose to allocate that energy, where you're going to choose to allocate that time. How much is it worth? And if all you are to someone in your organization is their paycheck, the minute they think there might be something better, the minute
they're gone.
That they get a little bit of courage or a little bit of temperature to say, I'm going to go look at something else, is the minute they're gone.
Oh yeah. And by the way, like your competition's sniping them every day because they know that. They know, hey, Billy, you want to make an extra $5,000? As a matter of fact, I don't mind that. No problem. Boom, gone. Like they have no loyalty. These guys don't trust me anyway. Like, boom, they're gone. They might not be looking for it, but when the opportunity pops, they'll take it in a second. So then they don't think twice about it. And you ask for that extra time. Hey, can you give us 4 weeks instead of 2? No. No. And they don't feel like they owe you anything, when you're that type of leader. But so jumping back into some of the vet stuff, because I think it's important, know what you know now. What would you give it to, maybe the seniors in high school or college kids that are thinking about joining the military? Like, know what you know now. What advice would you give someone thinking about joining?
So I really believe, one, have a clear sense of the job that you want in the military, because you can do almost anything. Like, if you want to be a Ranger, like I was, there's so much information that explains what RASP is. There's so, even now, like the 75th Ranger Regiment actually has liaisons at the basic training companies at Fort Benning, where if you didn't enlist with a Ranger option, what they call a 40 contract, you can still sign up. But then they have people like helping monitor your fitness, helping, there's so many resources out there right now. And that goes for almost any job. Like, take advantage of those, like prepare yourself for what you want to do. Because if you don't, then you're putting yourself behind the 8 ball. Like, I know this is so hard to do, and every adult's rolling their eyes, remembering what they were like at 18. And if they have teenagers, like, oh my God. But like, I actually read a lot. Like, after I talked to my uncle, my great uncle, I read a lot. I thought a lot about it. Like, I felt like I was making a really good adult decision. I think that you need to do that. The second thing is that get fit. Okay. Your physical fitness, especially in basic training, whatever you do, is going to matter so much, is going to be so important. run, lift weights, find whatever it is, that's going to be to your job specific. Like if you want to go be a SEAL, man, you better know how to swim and you better know how to fin and
better love that water, baby.
Yeah. Right. Same thing if you want to be in Marine, MARSOC or, Marine Special Ops or, even the Air Force guys, the CCT guys and the PJs, they swim a lot, right? Like you learn how to swim with a pair of fins. There's just because it's a veteran company that does some great stuff. Sawfleet has some great programs if you want to do that. Doug and the guys, I highly recommend that. Like they do a good job, and it's all former special ops guys that can get you right. Invest in that.
Yeah.
If you want to go in and you want to be in like cyber command, like one, your fitness needs to be there, but two, make sure that you did the research, that you know what it is. Like if you want to be a computer coder, but you want to work in Python and the job that you're going to apply for is going to be all coding C++, don't sign up for that. You know what I'm saying? I think that, that there are times where, the recruiter pressures you. It's like, know what you want and stand your ground on that. And then understand that you're going to grow up because you're going to have to, because you're going to be a part of a community. Again, like what we talked about, where they are going to make the stakes as high as possible because they have to, right? And if you are not prepared to accept that and you go in like, oh, well, I just want to be a coder in Cyber Command. Hey, man, Jessica Lynch was supposed to be just a supply specialist. Her Humvee got put in the wrong spot. And the next thing you know, they're in a gunfight.
Yeah.
If you're on a uniform, you could very well be in a gunfight. Yeah, maybe you never leave Fort Meade. Maybe you end up, in the middle of whatever is going to come down the pipe next on some outpost because you happen to be the one person who knows how to look at that satellite right. And someone like who's doing the job that I used to do needs you there in real time. Like you have to understand that you can be a water treatment specialist in the middle of the desert in Africa and something goes sideways and you're in a gunfight. That is part of the military. So, I went in for college money. I went in for adventure, right? I didn't think I was going to go to war. It was 1999 when I enlisted. I've got 2 combat tours, and that's nothing compared to, like Mike Burke, our friend who introduced us. Like, I have no idea how many tours Mike has, but it's 5-6x me, easy, right? Because that's what's had to happen, right? Just because they're saying that things are winding down right now, I find it hilarious that the current president's like, yeah, we're out of Iraq, but our advisors are still staying. Right. Advisors, like they have been since 2015 when my former squad leader, Josh Wheeler, was killed in action as an operator, right? There's always something going on in the world, right? And if it flares up and you're in uniform, your name could very well be called regardless of your job. So understand that that's part of the gig. But you're going to grow up. You're going to learn a tremendous amount. You're going to have a tremendous educational benefit if you choose to use it through the GI Bill. Getting a house is way easier. I promise you, through a VA loan, you have that. And you have the opportunity to really build relationships and have this fantastic network of very like-minded people that can really, really benefit you. Like, I mean, that's how you and I, literally looked at my buddy and like, hey, Mike, I'd love to do your podcast. I'd love you to come on and do ours. And, also like I'm trying to promote this book and just meet more vets and get out there. Like, who do you know? It's like, you got to meet my buddy, Dale. 3 days later, we're like, let's do a podcast. And, here we are. Like, this is what happens in that network, and it's great for everybody.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's, and I guess the other side of that is guys thinking to get out, same thing. What should they know before they make that decision, whether to re-enlist or discharge?
I would say, one, at some point you are getting out. Whether you make it a career or whether you don't, at some point the tribe is going to move on from you. So I'll leave it at whether you do it on a first term enlistment, kind of like I did. And then, I kept the guard, but still like I was out, or at 20 years, you're going to, and I'm a big believer in reading. So when I'm talking to guys getting out, there's 3 books that I highly, highly recommend. 2 of them you can read literally in a day. You could go back to back and they're super simple. The first one is Sebastian Junger's Tribe. He does such a great job of explaining how the pressure of being in the military and that fire that forges you really does put, a very tribal, very tight knit, close thing, and you are going to lose that, and how that is probably more harmful to your psyche and makes you more uncomfortable as a human being than these concepts of post-traumatic stress, which are very real. And in no way, shape am I minimalizing, but he does an excellent job of pointing out that even if you've been diagnosed with PTS, right, and even if you're trying to not have that be your disorder, but be your personal, post-traumatic growth mindset, stress growth mindset, as you're waging that war internally, there is still this other war that you have to wage in yourself of losing these people that are so critical and core to your identity and have been so for so long, because it's such a tight bond. Mm-hmm. He does a great job of just there's so much wisdom there. The second one is Ryan Holiday's Ego is the Enemy. My biggest frustration with veterans that are transitioning is thinking that they are so star-spangled special. And it makes me want to scream, because newsflash, if you do it right as a veteran, your competitive advantages outside in the marketplace is that ability to adapt quickly on the fly in a really calm way, your work ethic, which has gotten you everywhere so far, and your ability to work in a team. Those are your three competitive advantages. It is, and guess what? Those are great. You can find those other places. You are not entitled to anything. You signed the most bulletproof contract in United States law. Like, they literally teach it as L1 case study for the par excellence of a contract in your enlistment. And if you lived up to the terms of those contracts, the government will live up to the terms of it as well. If you want to argue about the VA healthcare system, well, fine, you're that guy and I'm not going to do it. But everything else, it's a contract. Accept that. You made a choice. You traded your labor and your time and your talent for financial compensation during the length of it and these other benefits on the way out. That's all you're owed. Okay. Society doesn't owe you anything. The government doesn't owe you anything past the terms of that deal. That is what it is. And when you leave that contract, when you leave that job and you're going somewhere else, what did you take with you? Focus on that. If you focus on that and you focus on your work ethic and you focus on those abilities, you will get further, farther, faster than your peer group. I see it every single day when guys and girls come in with that growth mindset, like we were talking about, and that I'm just going to outwork you. Yeah, man, you're going to go places quickly. And I think that Ryan's book with Ego is the Enemy does such a great job through Stoic philosophy and Stoic principles of highlighting all of the traps, especially transitioning veterans really fall into, right?
Yep.
Because there's three narratives of who veterans are in the modern American workforce. One, we're a ticking time bomb of PTS just lurking around the corner and we're about to go kaboom, which makes people reticent to hire us. Two, we're Captain America at the ball game and we're all the cheers and all the accolades and throw the parade for this guy or girl, right? Well, we all know that after you throw the first pitch and your favorite baseball player signed to the ball, they set you in the stands and no one really talks to you again except for the people in your row, right? It's its own fallacy. Your third is now this sort of emerging vet bro of, we're so bad and we're so cool, which is all fake, phony nonsense that I could give a TED talk about, which, I won't for the sake of time. But those are the three narratives. Instead of the hardworking, humble, creative, teamwork capable one, which is the majority of us. Whether you get that at the beginning of your transition or you go through some bumps and bruises and you start seeing it and you start realizing it, that is really the hallmark of the successful veteran. I'll pause I'll get to the third book in a second, but one of the things that just makes me think about it that always frustrates me with it is the greatest generation that we always talk about World War II. They weren't the greatest generation because they went over and whooped the Nazis and whooped the Japanese. Certainly helped. They were the greatest generation because they came home, they built small businesses, they became the high school civics teachers, they became the foreman at that manufacturing plant that we were talking about earlier, and they continued to invest in their communities. They didn't stop serving. They just served in another way. They elevated their communities. They elevated their homes. They elevated America by rolling their sleeves up and continuing to work their butts off. That is why they are the greatest generation, not because they picked up a gun and took out the trash. Yeah. And the opportunity is there for this next generation over the past 20 years to be the next greatest generation. I really believe that. But the other thing that we have to understand as veterans is less than 1% of the entire American populace has served in the past 20 years. That's just a fact from the VA. And if you lack that humility, if your ego has gotten in the way, where you think that 99.15% of Americans should invest the time, sight unseen, not understanding in you and your struggles and what makes you Star Spangled Awesome, lady or gentleman, you have missed the boat entirely. It is on you to show the example and set the example for others to follow. It is on you to educate people. It is on you to show and put your best foot forward, not expect anything from those people. And I think that Ryan's book, Ego is the Enemy, does such a great job of showing ego traps, and I can't recommend those two enough. The third one, and this is especially for combat vets, this is a much harder book to read. This is not those first two, anyone can. The third one, it takes some stick to itness. It's called The Body Keeps Score by Dr. Bessel van der Kolk, and he is a leading expert in mental trauma, post-traumatic stress disorder, things like that. He's been studying it since like the Vietnam War. That book is a hard read, brother. Like that is, I ugly cried through it a couple of times at one point. I got so upset. I literally threw the book across the room. I had to actually finish it on audiobook because it was like, there was some triggering stuff in there for me.
Wow.
But what it really does is it shows how mental stress and mental trauma also affects your body, and how, drugs are great, but why box breathing is so important, why yoga can help, why you have to put a holistic approach to your health, right? And not just your mental health. Again, not easy. It's one of those things that, especially if you have a therapist and you're working through your own stuff, I would actually encourage you to talk to them before you read it. But if you really want an understanding of what's going on in your body and some of those things that in a combat zone, or when you've been not just there, but like if you've been abused or you've had these things, like how your body internalizes those stressors and how that can like bleed out in your life. It's a really, really powerful one. And I think that it is so worth reading, and the work is so worth doing, because you start realizing how flawed this post-traumatic stress narrative is around not just veterans. Like, it actually really bothers me. There's so many people in this world. My ex-wife has PTS, and it had nothing to do. She wasn't a vet. It's just that sort of mental health, that sight unseen thing. And I think that it's well worth the understanding, because for me, one, it allowed me to be more graceful to myself, which is not always easy on a personal level. But two, I have a lot more empathy when I start recognizing some of the signs of other people struggling, and I don't flip over to that suck it up and drive on narrative. Because again, going back to what we talked about earlier, if you're in the middle of a gunfight, there's only one thing, and that is through. You will accomplish the mission. You will finish the fight. But when you get back to the fob, you're always talking to your boys. You're always checking in on people. You're all, you're not in a gunfight if you're at work, as long as you're not doing that job. Like, business is not a gunfight. Business is not war. Interacting with people is not that. And so to see those things, to have that empathy, to know that sometimes maybe the conversation needs to be, are you okay? Right? Rather than, this deliverable better get done. It's like, there are very few deliverables ultimately in this world that have to be done in 5 minutes, just in business. And having that empathy, it certainly helps me be a much better human being. But it's, again, man, it's hard. It is not an easy book to read if you've had any level of, mental or emotional trauma in your life. But certainly those are the three that I always recommend to people. I mean, even if it's only the first two, you will, if you embrace the knowledge in those books, you will get a much better and healthier perspective, in my opinion, as you transition out.
Yeah, I think that's awesome. I haven't heard of that, but I agree, man. I think for me, I'm not a combat veteran, but I empathize with everything that you just described on the mental aspect of, especially loss and effects of combat zone and things like that. And even more so the camaraderie, the brotherhood and the loss of a brother, for example. And what gets me in like a movie now, maybe this is what you meant by the book, is that like, there was a movie, I don't know what it is. I watched it on random, but Samuel L. Jackson was in it and others. And it was a movie about these veterans that are out that had a lot of mental health issues after. And I had to turn it off. I'm like, now see this shit right here. This is what's going to make me cry. Like because I feel that I do empathize with that stuff. I don't know personally. I don't know. I just have an uncanny ability to kind of put myself in their shoes and it hits me,
Right.
so I don't do good with that
That's
stuff,
empathy.
full disclosure. I
Yeah.
just don't, I don't do good at funerals and all that. And even if it's someone I don't know, but I just feel it. I feel what the loss, like, man, and I can't contain it. I just, it's one of those things. I don't know what it is for me, but yeah, I feel you.
We were talking before we started about how, like, the veteran discount and how you and I are both kind of like, man, I don't need a discount. I don't need you to remind me of something, like whatever, and how some people really seek it. And there's also, I noticed that there's this group of veterans who, I try to be a class of veteran where it's like, I just want to look at it and be like, we do not have the market cornered on trauma. Okay. We do not have the market cornered on post-traumatic stress. We do not have the market cornered on pain. Okay. I hate that on some levels, the veteran story and our pain is so on Front Street because it drove the news cycle for 15 years, right? That people coming back broken and wounded, and ways that Americans either in a very real, honest, and authentic way chose to show their support by donating to charities and and all these things and buying veteran stuff, or to do it to either assuage their guilt, or if they're a corporation, just to look good, right? Those are all three of those things have absolutely happened in this space. And that can also be something as you're processing your stuff and people are in your face and they want to like give you or things like that. Like, I understand that has got to be an extra layer of stress that I never had to experience because I wasn't one of I don't have a Purple Heart or anything. Like, I did my thing and, got out, but we don't have the market cornered on that. And, it's one of those things, like, this is when I tell business, like, cause like, this is what holds you back. If you're a vet, these are the things that like get you tripped up, where it's like, you think you're awesome and you think you're special and you think that someone, but then at the same time you're frustrated because people don't understand you. Right. And you can't get that job that you want. And you think that you're more qualified. And it's like, you don't want to do the work, that's sometimes required. And it is work. It's a lot of work sometimes to get through that. And then it's, and then it turns into this, like, well, if you'd lived in my shoes, it's like, man, everybody is struggling with something. I mean, everybody. And some of it's really obvious and some of it isn't. And that empathy and that understanding is going to get you so much farther than the demand. Again, that having that growth mindset of how do we learn from each other, as opposed to, well, come over and meet me. Again, over 99% of the American population is not served in the past 20 years. Like, how, I mean, you and I are vets, like we vibe on the same thing, but if I shaved my beard just for a skit for the movement, I used to have the same beard you do. You and I walk around and I put on my Oakleys and, you've got your, your Lion Guy t-shirt on, and I'm rocking one with a Vietnam vet with a surfboard, and we're just walking down the street. Like, we're going to get some looks. We're going to get some weirdo. Right. And it's on us to be like, nah, man, we're cool. Right. Because that person already has something in their head, and it's not going to change unless we try and change the conversation. And it's only going to be reinforced if we act like idiots. And that's the thing, man. Like, and that's where vets have to get better, sort of as their own little tribe. And that's why I love those 3 books so hard, because at the end of the day, if you learn the lessons from them, it's, yes, we are special, but so is or not special. I hate that word.
Yeah. And I think
unique. You know what I mean? Like, we're unique.
Right. Yeah.
But there's a lot
and
of
that's it. It's a great quote from Les Brown, right? He says, the used to be's don't make no honey, right? Yeah. So when you transition into the civilian world, you got to know, like, you can't keep living your glory days. And I've seen this isn't just vets. Like, I hear guys talk about this, where I went to college and what I did to college and like where I used to do and what I used to this and what I used to that. And I once I heard that quote, I would drop it all the time and say, hey man, used to be's don't make no honey. Like, what are you doing now? Like, right. What value are you going to take from that? Because I don't want to dishonor that. Like, this whole conversation is about the veteran advantage, and there's a lot.
Yep.
Hey, that's great, man. You were a Marine. You're a Ranger. Cool. You're here now.
Right.
What are we doing now?
Right.
We're not reliving the glory days, right? Like, and that's, I think, to your point, like, know the value that you can bring. Don't relive your glory days and have to remind everyone that you served and whatever. And look, I say yes, be a prideful veteran. Yes, we as society, we owe you a debt, from the perspective of you did volunteer, you did sign that contract and all that stuff. So you did that. Yes, but don't relive it. It's not, what you think that someone owes you something. It goes back to the entitlement thing. Like, at the end of the day, you served, right? You got a lot out of it. There's so much
Yes.
opportunity there. That's what I tell young folks to go in. I say, hey, there's so much there. There's so much opportunity there for you.
Mm-hmm.
Don't blow it, right? Like the rules are more strict. UCMJ, like you are sacrificing your own freedoms for the protection of ours, let's say. So don't go screw it up. Just as much opportunity there's so much more opportunity to make your life hell if you don't check in and take advantage of the opportunities before you. The best thing you can do is get on those yellow footprints or whatever and start being ready to change your life for the better and take advantage of every single thing they put in front of you, because that's what's going to serve you. I mean,
well, and I mean, but the thing is that the veterans don't have the market cornered on, like you said, like, some people live in their glories and stuff. And like the thing that I say to anybody, just anyone I'm talking to when it comes to business, there has never been more knowledge out there in the world, right? Especially when you start your career, when you've got your foothold or you sort of got your beachhead and you're ready to go, like, man, I did some game theory in college and I always loved it. I wanted to improve it. So I'm like, you know what? I'm going to take a game theory course. So I go to Coursera and I look up game theory courses. And one of the top economists in the world happens to be a professor at Stanford. And he is on this game theory course for free. Some of the hardest won institution, one of the most prestigious institutions in the world, one of the prestigious people teaching it in the world. And all I got to do is click a button and hit play. And I will learn 201 level game theory. Like, the excuse of, I don't have the knowledge. That sometimes, like, I don't have access to the knowledge. This is why I need a degree. That was probably true on some levels 20 years ago, 30 years ago, certainly. It's not now. You can find it. You put a little bit of investment. Now, are you going to have this piece of paper? No. Are you going to have the knowledge? Yes. Can you tailor, veteran or not, apply that work ethic and that competitive advantage of, I will not quit. I will drive on. I will complete this, that growth mindset that we're talking about. Pair it to that knowledge that you already have demonstrated that growth mindset by going out and seeking. Doors open for people like that. And when they look back in time and they're trying to figure out how they got from A to the Z where they finally got the job, it's always a wild ride. It's always a weird story. And I always love hearing them. But I'll tell you what, in my experience, I have never, and I don't like big words like that, but I'm going to use it here because I think it's appropriate. I have never heard someone who applies the willingness to assimilate and get knowledge and work really hard to attain it and work with that growth mindset to apply it, to have the drive, to have the motivation, even if they don't necessarily have a specific piece of paper, and not succeed on some levels. I'm not saying they turn into Bill Gates, but I am saying that they do succeed. I am saying that they go from, one spot here and they end up here, and that's at the end of it. That's what it is. And it's, like this is, with Lions Guy being a podcast about leadership and business, it's like, are you encouraging that in your people? Are you giving them the space to do that? Or do you just want them to punch clocks? And do you just want them to hit play? And do you just want, because to get people to do that means that you have to allow them to take chances. And when you take chances, someone's going to fail sometimes. And then you're going to have to walk some things back. It's like, but are you willing to accept this very moderate risk if you do it right for tremendous opportunity? Are you willing to think outside that, do they have this piece of paper box, as opposed to, can they demonstrate that they have these skills and find that hard charging person? Because when that opportunity meets that person, just like I believe that most veterans, and that's where sort of our competitive advantage, in my opinion, of that growth mindset, hardworking, and adaptable meet. That's where I see a lot of veterans do that. Like, that's where things just scale, and vets don't have that market cornered. We're better in it. We have a higher percentage in it, but we're not cornered in it. And those are the people I'm always looking for. I had I had someone come into my office a couple of days ago that's in another department, and they were like, hey, I heard that something might be opening up a little bit under, I'm like, well, there's been some internal discussions, and, I don't know if the position will be created, but it's been discussed. And they're like, well, would you consider me for it? And here's my background. And I'm like, well, I don't quite have it, but it's on the roadmap. It's not an immediate thing. I'm like, here's the knowledge that you need to make yourself competitive. And are they going to follow through on that or not? I don't know. But I can tell you right now, if they do go do that coursework and they do show me those, those certifications, and they do come back, if that position is created, I promise you they're at the absolute top of my list because they did the work, because they said, I'm in it, I'm here to work for it, and then they put it in. Who doesn't want that as a leader? Who doesn't want that? Who doesn't want that on? So, using the buzzword, the U.S. is a go to war team, right? Like, that's the person you want.
And I think like that's the point that I wanted to make sure we touched on today was, even though a lot of this conversation has been about the veteran advantage, like all these qualities that I would say are common. It's not always the case, certainly. And just like there's bad doctors, bad cops, and there's bad vets too. Like, so like at the end of the day, we all put our pants on one leg at a time. We're still people. But the veteran advantage, as we've holistically described it today or a lot, the accountability, the discipline, the leadership, the training, the drive, like all those things. But at the same time, this show is about high performance. And one of the things that I hit people with is because people will take that and label me sometimes and go, oh, because you're a Marine, ... And I go, no. And I wanted to make sure this point's clear on this show today. It's like, look, everything that we've described, and I like how you're saying is not veteran specific. Like they're decision specific. They're I have what I have, not because I was a Marine. It's because the decisions I've made throughout my lifetime. And one of them happens to have been to join the Marine Corps. Right. But since then and during then and whatever, like what you see is a culmination of all the decisions I've made. And by the way, there's nothing special about me. So don't label me like a vet. So because you're a vet, you've got, no, man, like, it's everything that we described, the leadership, the discipline, the ego, like all these things, like they're universal, right? Like they're universal.
Well, and I think that you always make choices and you always make decisions. And this is what I say, if a veteran chooses to make the decision to embrace their competitive advantages from that job and from that moment in their life and apply them to their next role, to their next opportunity tonight, they will be successful. I stand on that. But we're talking about choices and everything. Like the things that I have learned in the past, 3 or 4, past 3 to 5 years have been all the things on some levels, if you want to get really deep into, is unlearning some of the mentality that I had in the military. It's a double-edged sword. Like, I was at Ranger Up. Nick, who is still the CEO there, who is still a good friend of mine. As a matter of fact, he's got a media company called Diesel Jack Media, doing ads and it's phenomenal. If you need ad and marketing work, they're insane. And he's doing that. We're still good friends. He actually did all that, the ad group for the book, The 20-Year War, that we're working on. We're still good friends. But, in 2015, we started having very adult disagreements on how to run the business. And ultimately the decision was, we got to is that it was time for me to move on from the company. That sucked. That was painful. That hurt, and again, we're good. And Tim and I are, Tim's actually in our book, Tim Kennedy, who is another partner, former UFC fighter, Green Beret, Mr. Insano. And he is, that dude's awesome, but he is everything you see in his social media and more, but so there's that separation, that hurt. And then inside of the year, my now ex-wife left. And those are not veteran specific things, right? Those are, totally universal. And suddenly I am absolutely flat on my back, Dale. I am where I thought I was, and I'm going dude, I'm just flat on my back looking up going, and then that security job I had that I was already uncomfortable with and really having a hard time, I got fired from for, just things that there was some politics involved. And then I really got angry. Right. And I'm like, so now none of this has anything to do with my veteran experience. This is just life, right? This is just how do I overcome it? It was and the lessons that I had to learn for that was sort of the like we're talking about, is like realizing that sometimes the best thing you can do is the battlefield pause. That I'm not actually in a life or death thing right now. I can take a breath, because that was so hard for me, especially at Ranger Up. Well, it was like, no, we've got to every single day. Like what got me into that truck, right, got me in trouble and caused a lot of friction with some of my employees, because I did not recognize that I'm at a 10 and they're at an 8. And you want to know what? An 8, generally speaking, is pretty, you know what I'm saying? Like, maybe I need
Yeah, they're pushing it. Yeah.
But I certainly need to come down to them on some levels. And if I want them to elevate for something, it is certainly not going from that already high 8 to like 10. Like, they were never, that 6, like, my buddy who really needed to incrementally elevate. So it's like, oh, great. What am I going to do? Where am I going to go? And for me, my life gave me the opportunity, because there were, Ranger Up ultimately sold to a firm. Nick still retains some, still the CEO, still has an ownership stake. Tim has a little bit too, but we sold a substantial portion of it, and I exited, and I decided that I was going to take a break. I got lucky. So I grabbed a 40-liter backpack, just a backpack, and went all the way around the world for 5 months. And the lessons that I ended up learning there were, on some levels, unlearning certain facets of who I was, who I'd sort of become. That sort of started with my military thing. 1, patience. 2, way, way more empathy. When you're in a country that you don't speak the language, that they don't speak yours, and you're pointy talking your way through how to get somewhere, you're in there. You understand really acutely. You are the foreigner.
Yeah.
You are the person that doesn't belong. And it is on you to be as polite and as patient and as kind and as understanding, because this person's investing in trying to help, right?
Mm-hmm.
It is not on them. They could keep walking down the street and not care a fig for you in Myanmar. And I was in Mandalay, Myanmar, for the thing I'm thinking about. Like, I'm just the white dude, right? I'm the foreigner, and I look like the foreigner. I mean, I'm 5'6" and I'm a tall guy. Okay. That's a really weird thing, by the way. Like, dude's 5'2", 5'3", and you're like, how did I become kind of almost tall, right? And like, in those, so it was learning some of that. It was having that appreciation. It was having, sort of reminding myself that growth mindsets are to continuously improve, is to not get stagnant, because I did, like, I bought into this, well, I'm this person, and this person is great. And, and then it's like reestablish, like, no, there's kind of a castle mentality. There's kind of a, well, I've done X and that's cool. And like, we can just sort of, no, like, you've always got to be pushing yourself to improve. That doesn't mean making more money, in my opinion. That doesn't mean getting a promotion, or, like, you set your goals and go work and drive to attain them. That's the important thing. But also, and this is what I was reminded of, is know why you have the goal, right? Why is that a goal? Why is that important? Look, if your goal is to make a whole bunch of money and make sure that your family and your kids and your grandkids and your great grandkids are financially secure for all of their lives, go for it. If your goal is to have a really good work-life balance, and your 40 hours a week is a hard day's work for a hard day's pay, as cliche as that is to some people, but you get to go home to your family and you really you're devoted and you invest, and that's where you want to put your time, effort, go for it, man. Like, I am not here to tell someone how to live their life, but have a goal and know why. Because if you don't, you are going to stagnate. And if you stagnate, you're going to want to start castling, and you're going to lose that growth mentality and that growth mindset. And when you lose that, you're not just going to suffer as a leader. You're not just going to suffer in business. You're going to suffer spiritually. Like, how, and I say that very in tune, like, how you deal with yourself, and how, like, I got so lost with some of that. And like, I had to take sort of the radical step to leave literally, and, literally be in a new place every 3 or 4 days to remind myself of that, and part of it was the challenge of just getting around, of just, like, being in these hostels and meeting these new people and challenging my ideals in life. Like, I'm kind of a radical person to begin with. And that was sort of the radical shakeup that I needed, right? To remind me of some of these basic lessons, and, that there are different ways to do things. There's different tactics and techniques, and one is not better usually than the other. Right. And, you've got to have that tangible goal, because if you don't, you are really asking for it.
Yeah, I mean the three core values of Lions Guide, just from my life philosophy, is courage, clarity, and leadership. And we've not said that word yet, but we've talked a lot about it, even back to getting prepared to go in, to service and all that. But the clarity, like
Yeah.
having clarity of your desired goal, right? Yes, that's leadership, but having clarity is key, man. Like
Yeah.
you've got to know where you're trying to go, because it's just, again, it's just key. And you describe it like you're like, hey man, I got to get clear on what you
Mm-hmm.
want, and what you want is okay. There's no right answer. Like,
Right.
but there's a big wrong one, which is
Yep.
not knowing what you want and not
Oh
knowing
yeah.
where you want to go. I mean, that is suffering.
Yes.
That there's a lot of suffering there. It's mentally tormenting. So, and I tell people, if you're not clear on where you want to go, start with where you don't want to go.
Mm-hmm.
And
Right.
run in the opposite direction, right? Like say,
Right.
I don't want this, this, and this. Hey, that's great. That's great. You don't know where you want to go. You don't want to go there. So just turn around and start going the opposite way. What does that look like? And that's why I just adopted clarity as a core value, because it's so critical. It's so critical.
Well, it's funny because so in my office, I have a dry erase board right, like I'm typing at my computer and I look up and I have dry erase board right there. And what I do with that is I put my mottos, I put my like life lessons. And the first one is, it's the simplest form of the idea, because I shamelessly steal everything I know about marketing and process improvement and everything from Christopher Nolan movies. It's like I keep doing the Tenet like all the time when I'm talking about sales and marketing integration. It's become a joke at work. And that's what Eames says in Inception. It's the simplest form of the idea. The second thing is I always call it the Ranger proverb. The Marines in my organization say it should just be the military proverb, but it's my whiteboard. But it's slow is smooth and smooth is fast. And then there's another one, and we have this as a company thing. It's why are you here, right? Sort of that clarity. And then the final one is this is from sarcastic me to whiny me, and it's good talk. No one cares. Grind. Because when you start thinking about all of it, if it's courage, clarity, and leadership, like the self leadership has got to be the mastery of the soldier or Marine's right to gripe is never denied. So have your moment. And I tell people all the time, like, you can come in, you can close my door, and you can let it fly, man. Like, it is as safe a space as possible, with the one proviso of when it's out of your system, when you vented your spleen, you better have a working solution. You better have some sort of solution. You better have some sort of idea how to make this better, right? Like, you better have that, like we're talking about clarity, you better have at least some idea, even if it's not totally clear, of how we're going to solve this. Like, vent it and go. And I think that that's another thing I think I've learned over my life, is that sometimes to find clarity, you just need to like unload or like push, vomit out whatever the garbage, the things that cloud, and just be able to say like, I'm frustrated, right? I get more clarity when I just go, I'm frustrated and I'm angry and I'm disappointed. And I am, even if I just rip those things off and I go, okay, I've acknowledged that. I'm clear on how I feel. I am clear on I have a problem, and I'm clear that like you said, either this could be the solution or this can't be the solution, right? The guardrails. Yep. And now I'm going to live inside that and start moving forward. And I think that's one of the fascinating things about clarity. Clarity, some people think it's like a diamond or something, like, oh, I've had this eureka epiphany. Sometimes clarity is just acknowledging how you feel and giving yourself the space to say, okay, had it, processed it, time to go. And at least for me, I have to remind myself that is an internal thing. That's why no one cares. I care because it's me, right? But my boss doesn't care. The people I work with don't care, unless I do the wrong thing and start negatively affecting them. And so it's having that, that understanding, that situational awareness and moving forward. And but I do think that that's a very misunderstood thing at times in leadership, is like, oh, and also I think that's where, the term I think gets way overused, but that concept of toxic masculinity, I always think it's like toxic machismo. To me, I've always been way more comfortable, like, because machismo is pretty toxic, right? Like when I start doing this King Kong thing or whatever, it's like anyone who's actually been there before, like, I'm loud, I'm boisterous, I'm really verbose. So if you're louder than me, if you've usurped me as the loudest guy in the room, sorry, my guy. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm not saying I haven't met a couple of them. I am saying that it's like, why are you? But why? You know?
Right. So what's tell us about the book. What is it? You know, how did the idea come about?
So I mentioned Dan Blakely and I were both in the 2nd Ranger Battalion at different times. It's really funny that a lot of like the team leaders and squad leaders, when he arrived as a private, were my peers. But he got out and he joined the North Carolina National Guard. Similar to me, he didn't want to get into the IRR, and he was going to App State, and we became instructors together. Sort of lost touch a little bit, and then we reconnected in November of last year, and I was really burnt out. I really was very reticent to sort of go back into like veteran space and stuff like that from Ranger Up, and just the political climate as it's changed in this vet bro culture that I'm not about that life. I'm about what we've been talking about, right? And I love working with vets that way, but I don't need a fancy gee whiz to make myself feel better the way that I thought I did before I've gotten a little older. And so Dan's like, hey, I've got this project. And he starts explaining the book. He explains that Bo Simmons, who's his childhood best friend and the third person in there, has been this amazing photographer since 21. Bo's got a great story of like, he was working in fashion and he was Usher's photographer for a little while. Like, there's levels to the game, right? And people are like, oh, I'm a photographer. No. Bo only shoots on film. Like, he's a little pretentious about it. And I say that in the nicest way possible because like, he's that much of an artist. Like, it's insane. He's so good. He's got 10 shots and somehow he just nails it. Super talented, amazing high-end photographer. And so he's like, we're doing this. And I'm like, okay, well, yeah, like, dude, this actually sounds great. This is awesome. Like, I'm getting more and more excited. I'm like, what do you need? He's like, well, we don't have enough vets. Would you consider being in the book? And then would you consider like introducing your network? I'm like, oh, hell yeah. Right. I get so excited. The first email that I send for him, I don't put a subject line on it. It's just like, and of course, my buddy Bill, who I sent it to at the National Veterans Memorial Museum, is making more fun of me than, he's like, but yeah, I got you. It's all good. The next one I sent was actually to now General Retired Votel, who had been my commander when I worked staff. It's like, hey, sir, would you be willing to do this? And so starts getting momentum, starts getting everything. And I'm just pushing people his way. Dan called, good networking, good everything. And Dan calls me like a couple weeks later, like, hey, you're a really talented writer and we really need someone to write these stories. Would you do it? I'm like, yeah, like, absolutely. And so we got into this insane cadence. So, first of all, I should back up. Like, we started on this book in late December of 2020. If I had taken this pitch or this proposal to Simon & Schuster or Random House or one of the big ones, they've been like, you want to do a book with initially we're going to do 70. We ended up with 71, 70 veterans all across the country, portraits, stories, everything. And you wanted to release by 9/11. And we'd be like, yes, get out. Like, we're not, but again, like, and so this project is just a lot of things we've been talking about we're not going to quit. We are, that we're going to go after it, that grit, that determination, that growth mindset. Like, we just applied it. And so Bo is out on the road taking these pictures and recording the audio files of the veterans. He's sending them to me. I'm going back and forth on sort of a consultant schedule between Chicago and Omaha, which is where I'm now in Omaha. That's where I live now. Like, listening to these files and typing them up and sending them to our editor and just every night, 2 or 3 stories, he'd get 2 or 3 photos and just grinding. It was incredible. Like the shirt that I'm wearing right now is actually from one of the guys in the books company, Live American Yogi, Phil Sussman. Just had that on. And it's all the story is really simple. It's who they are and what inspired them to enlist, a brief sketch of their service, what their transition was like and what they're doing now. And the power in it is, one, the photo of seeing what these veterans look like now, at various levels of the 20 years of the GWAT. But also, there's so much in the story of we think that like veterans, because we're such a small community, or you see so much that like we're all similar. Like, everyone's got a different story in this book. There's some similarities, there's some things that are pretty close, but everyone's story is radically different. everyone generally gets to sort of the same spot, if they will, like where they've sort of found their peace for the most part and what they're doing now and how they're happy but like how they got there and what happened was different. They all, the through lines are kind of what we talked about is that growth mindset, that determination is really embracing the power of that work ethic. A lot of entrepreneurs, I'm wearing a fellow entrepreneurs, t-shirt right now. A lot of just dedication, a lot of really like caring and wanting to make an impact on their community, which to me was just awesome. And it was the stories are so inspiring. The pictures are, Bo did just such an amazing job that, when we were putting it together, we were just like, dude, this is crazy. But it's just really that story of this is who a veteran is, right? Not Captain America, not a ticking time bomb, and some guys talk about, trying to kill themselves. So, in the book, there's some people that, one person got chaptered out because of a drug addiction from the unit, right? Medic in the unit, like the best of the best. And you're leaving because you had an opioid addiction. And sort of like the process of going back through that and being more integrated into the community and sort of processing that guilt and those things like that. Like that's in there. There's stories of, finding themselves, we've got one that she got her MBA from Wharton, went to West Point, is still a McKinsey consultant, climbed Mount Everest, has a Guinness Book of World run record. She lives out of her van, traveling all around the US because that's like how she finds her peace and is finding her bliss and learning how to like process her stuff, right? One of the flat out hands-on smartest and most driven and determined people you will ever meet in your life. I mean, Sophie is just awesome. So impressive. It's like, you're like, why are we talking? Right. Like you could do anything. And she's still like, this is what I need. Her story for me affected me a lot because it was the one where I had to sort of get with her more and be like, I had my trip around the world was something very similar to what you're doing right now. And so I need to make sure that this is your story and your voice and I'm not bleeding into it. So that was that was probably the most challenging story to write just because there's enough parallels that I wanted it to be authentically her. It's like, have that. And then you have some people that like, man, their transitions seemed really easy. I mean, genuinely like their voice is happy and like, and they're like, man, I'm like, we're just ready to go. Some people it was rough and you get a really sense of who the men and women are that have fought to defend this country for the past 20 years. No hype, no real drama, but just and also the lessons that they've learned. And there's, I was really glad when we were talking about like the veteran advantage and that's what we want to talk about. And one of the things and like, yeah, I'm here to, this is where I plug the book 20yearwar.com, of course, but I can say that the thing I love the most about this project was so rewarding and beneficial for me as a leader. It was a reminder of what happens when those competitive advantages that we have talked about, which again, are not unique to veterans. We just have them built in a more structured way and a way that's easier for us to sort of access in our mind when they are applied, how far someone can go, how high they can go, where, we've got C-level executives. The world, if you apply this, is your oyster. It really is. If you have that grit, that determination, if you can work in a team, if you are willing to grind, if you have that clarity of purpose and know how to get to the mission, that's the story in this. It's what I say so often to veterans. It's like, again, going back to that greatest generation thing, it's like if we work together and if we set the example for others to follow, because that's ultimately what a leader does, right? A leader sets an example, a leader sets a tone and gets people to follow them. One of the lines in the afterword that we put in the book that was really intentional was, above all, a veteran is trained to be a leader. And anyone can be one. Yeah. Anyone can embrace that. But you want some wisdom and some knowledge from some people far, far smarter and far, far more accomplished than me. Like, that's what I soaked up from it. Like, this book could sell not a single unit passed, and I will forever be grateful for it because all the lessons that I learned and all of the seeing the similarities and differences and experiences and journeys. And I mean, like I know I'm like getting emotional, like I'm getting excited, but it's like, there's so much power to it. And but there's no hype. There's none of that. It's like, this is just who these people are, honestly, like Tim Kennedy agreed to be in the book and he's probably the most famous person that we have. And Tim's all over and Tim's got multiple businesses. And it's like, I have known Tim Kennedy since 2008, right? Like this is someone, he was in my wedding, right? And I'm listening to this audio and I immediately called Dan. And I'm like, can we use this? It's like, what do you mean? And I'm like, these are like the behind closed doors. Some of this is like, we don't, like, and a couple, and it was like, because it was authentic. It was like, he's talking about some really personal failures and some really like, and people who knew Tim knew that, like, but he also has, there's a public expectation of this person. Right. And, everyone has a public persona. I know we both do a little bit. You just have to, there's a level of like, he's just raw. And I'm like, and then, and like, so Dan and I talked to, and like, yeah, we can do this. And that's just, and every single time, that's what these men and women were doing. And I don't know I truly, Dale, don't know what inspired it in them. I think that they knew we were just trying to tell the real story and we weren't here to, add to the hype machine. We just wanted to be able to show that. And I think that they believed us and they trusted us and they gave us that access, but that's what we got. And it's, dude, it's incredible. It really is.
Well, I love it because, and honestly, it just reminded me like why I do this now, the podcast. Like this isn't how I make my money. I do this because I want to have authentic conversations about what's real. Like there's so much fluff out there, man. And people like they judge themselves, It's like they're seeing all this fluff out there and they judge themselves, harshly and wrongfully against that fluff and this made up standard and all these things. And I just want to be real about what performance looks like, what success looks like. And the struggles are real and the failures are real. You just don't hear about them. And I want to talk more about them because those are the best things, right? We see the results of the lessons learned from those failures and experiences. But I think a lot of people beat themselves up and they just don't know that their struggles have been had before, are had by others. And it's good to know that so you don't feel so lonely, in trying to be a high performer, trying to accomplish your goals. And you're struggling, you're running up these hills, running these walls, and you're going, this must be me, right?
Right.
No, obviously he didn't have these problems. Like, no, he had those same problems and he did it too. So can you,
And, I have such a love-hate relationship, way more hate at this point with social media, especially at Ranger Up being some of the pioneers in using it to transmit messages and make money and, all that. Like that we were, part of it is because, Nick went there, but Fuqua, the Duke's MBA, has done a case study on veteran lifestyle stuff. And the Ranger Up workout video that Nick and I did is arguably the first piece of like veteran lifestyle content, like the first sort of like influencer piece, which is a weird thing to say, but if you want to study this stuff, you can sort of say that. And that was just us being goofy and being like, well, Ranger panties, AKA silkies, are hilarious. And so we're just going to screw off, right? Like it was meant to be like, if you get the joke, you get the joke. If you don't, well, we don't care. We're doing it for our community. Like I'm falling down the hill and the fake parachute landing fall and stuff. And it's like, it started off as fun, and then as it's evolved and as it's gotten like so corporate and so, I mean, not even corporate, but so stylized and so, this thing, like it's not real anymore. Or if it is, it's only this tiny little slice of it. And I've told people, I'm like, man, like when influencers, like, one of those little tricks, like if you're going to take a photo or like a selfie, it's like you jut your chin out like that, because even though I'm in really good shape. Like if I go like this, you can see like just the natural, like, this is normal. This is normal human, but you see this and people make fun of it. And it's like, so pick your chin up and you stick it out here. And especially if you cock your head a little bit, you get, and suddenly like I look right now, like 10 pounds lighter. I'm 162 pounds, man. Like there's nothing wrong with, I'm in shape. I can still go out and run the Ranger Standard on a 5 mile. I'm committed to it. But this is the stuff people do, right? And then like with the filters and the, all the other stuff. And suddenly it's like, and you see this bleeding over this sort of false and phony and fake, where it was like, when I was out back on the dating, and it's like, you see, if you go on Tinder now, guys and girls, this is not a gender specific thing, are using those filters to make themselves look better. Like they are so they're so ingrained in this concept of this impossible concept of not even perfection, of just idealization that's evolved, that they can't even be authentic enough to say, hey, this is me, right? Like, it's funny. I mean, I of course took it the other way. Like my first thing said, bald, bearded, short, 5'6". Are you still reading? And then like, I was like, okay, this is who I am. Like, let's just cut the noise out. But like, this is, and that's one of those things. And it's like, I think that we as a society are actually really craving authenticity. I really think that, and I think that there is such, I don't want to say opportunity, because I just, that feels like it's a loaded term, but it's the only one I'm coming up with right now, for leaders, authentic leaders to step into that void, whether it's in their business, whether it's in their community, whether it's, in these, their church or their, whatever, and say, this is, let's be real. Let's have a growth mindset. Let's come together. Let's work as a team rather than try and perpetuate all this influencer behavior and things like that. And I think that there is so much power in that. And one of the reasons that I go back to, and I tell veterans all the time, is that you had to do these things in the military. You had to succeed. You had to, literally at times, to survive. So take those competitive advantages and go apply that growth mindset to make something better. Vince Vargas, aka Rocco, who's on Mayans, MC as an actor, and with someone else that's in the book, he's got a company and it's called Veteran, better veteran. And it's like, our goal here is to continue to foster the community where we all are better, where we improve, where we go. And that is, if everyone applied that message, forget veterans, just if every leader said, we're going to try and make everything, going back that 1% better a day. It's not much, but it's where things go. It's where we as people can do the right thing. And that was what really got me excited about the book, was to show that authenticity. And when you start at authenticity, you're already a little better, because you're not playing that game of, well, how far do I have to jump my chin out to make it look like I got neck muscles, man? Right?
Or who are you really? Right? The game of like, okay, who are you really? Let's play that game. Yeah.
All my faults, right, wrong, or indifferent, they're right here. And I think that, all my positives are too. And let's go. And I just think that's so inspiring.
Yeah, man, I love it, man. I love it. And I love that of the book, right? I think that the authenticity piece, and let's get people back to being real again. Okay. It's been a fun 10, 15 years or whatever it's been with social media and everyone trying to pretend there's something they're not. But let's bring it back home now. Like let's bring it back and get real again.
Well, honestly, we did a pitch and stuff, and everyone's like, well, why a book? I'm like, because it's old school. Because you have to feel it, because they're like, well, are you going to put it on Kindle? And it's like, you're not going to see the pictures as well. I mean, we could, but it's like, you've got to turn the page. You've got to invest a little bit to get the story, but it's worth, and it's a tiny investment. It's tiny, right? But it's worth it. It's, I think that one of the hallmarks about authenticity is you've got to seek it a little bit, right? Like you've got to have discernment. You've got to do those things. Again, to find clarity, you have to have discernment, right? And that takes practice. That requires effort. And I think that's really important. I really do.
Yeah, no, I'm with you, man. So cool. Well, as far as the book's concerned, how can people help, connect? What are we looking for in that regard?
If you're interested and you want to take a look, 20yearwar.com, that's the website. Just it's all spelled out. And then, you can see a couple of sample stories. You can see some of the pictures. It's available for pre-order right now. The pre-orders will start shipping out sometime in the next week and a half or so, actually. The official release date is 9/7. So, it will be coming soon. And then if you want to, that's the best place to find the book. If you want to follow us as an organization, weareunitedvalor.com is sort of the parent company that Dan, Bo, and I put together. We've got some more veteran stories there in longer format. We're going to start putting out some, the typical thought pieces and the, not quite doing what the Lion Guide does directly to leadership, but more how veterans can positively impact their community and the world, and try and create that. And then the other thing I would say too is that again, my name's Tom Amenta. Look me up on any social media platform, Twitter, Facebook, or Instagram, if you want to connect and you've got like the next great idea. Like the other thing that we're all really passionate and really committed to, and I know you saw this through Mike and I, is finding those authentic people and finding those authentic stories and telling the world in order to get that continuous improvement and to give that sort of clarity and hopefully get a whole bunch of really smart leaders together and just continue to move the ball forward.
Yeah, man. I love it. And for those who are wondering, it wasn't sound effects, me dropping the meows in the podcast.
Yeah, no,
there's a cat.
There's a cat. So.
So awesome, man. Dude, Tom, it's been an honor to have you on, man. I appreciate it. And people, this is going to serve people. It's going to serve the people that need to hear it, man. So thank you. Thank you very much.
All right, dude. I appreciate it so much, Dale. Thank you for the time.
Yep. Thank you.
All right, buddy.
All right.